Welcome to another edition of The Barking Dead.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of EPL on
Class is in session, hitting the books on Pub Sports.
This is another exciting edition of the main event on Talking Ant.
Class is in session, hitting the books on Pub Sports Radio, Monday, November 21st, Thanksgiving week, feast week, as ESPN's calling it, whatever you want to call it, but a busy week in sports betting and including another big slate of college football. Ian Cameron, Conor Mac with you, and we are ready to break down another big college football slate. To be quite honest, this is going to be the final full regular season slate that we'll be breaking down on the show. Next week, there'll be a handful of regular season games, but for the most part, it's going to be conference championship week next week in college football. So we're at the tail end of the season already, if you can believe it, and then bowl games coming up after that. Let's get into it. As always, we've got some action to begin the proceedings starting on Tuesday night. So we will start off this edition of Hitting the Books with our first matchup Tuesday night, Maction Bowling Green taking on Ohio, where we have right now the Ohio Bobcats 6.5-point home favorites here, 55 being the total in this game. The Ohio Bobcats certainly in a good spot right now in terms of the MAC East Division. You can see where they are right now. They are currently 6-1 in conference play. Bowling Green, believe it or not, 5-2, trailing them, and they've all of a sudden ascended, believe it or not, to second place in the MAC East. So this is essentially the de facto, if you will, MAC East Division Championship. Ohio wins this, they're going to end up obviously being in the MAC title game, and they're favored to do that. Bowling Green, I got to be honest, that the thing that has given them a shot is the shocking, and I mean shocking, upset win at Toledo last week in the Glass Bowl, 42-35, where they had the lead comfortably, blew it. Toledo gets the lead with in the last minute or so, and then Bowling Green at the end ends up getting the touchdown to go ahead and win the game. Crazy game last week, Toledo and Bowling Green. And that upset win is 15-point dogs. And I think on this show, both Connor and I said, don't you dare lay those points with Toledo. They're a bad favorite. And sure enough, they ended up losing the game outright to Bowling Green. So now all of a sudden, this Bowling Green comes into this game, loses a goose, new life, a shocking chance to maybe steal the MAC East title away from Ohio, because if they beat Ohio, both teams end up being 6-2 in the conference, and it's going to end up going to Bowling Green because they beat Ohio head-to-head, obviously. So huge stakes here between these two teams, Bowling Green and Ohio. I lean to the dog again here, and the problem is I've kind of talked myself out of fading Ohio. And I don't know if I'm going to bet Bowling Green here. I lean to the Falcons. They've got new life. Their offense finally played like I thought they should have played all year. Matt McDonald, I thought that was going to be a pretty good offense, and they finally played like it against Toledo last week when they've kind of struggled all season. Can they keep that going here? You've got to believe they're going to have to score some points in this game if they're going to have a shot. I'm certainly interested in the over. Again, you always have to check weather, at this time of year. So look at the weather conditions at Peden Stadium, Solich Field, whatever they're calling it now in Athens, Ohio. Make sure you end up checking to see if the weather's going to be okay. But I could certainly envision this being a game with points scored in it. Bowling Green's defense has been lackluster. They gave up 35 to Toledo last week. Who knows what Ohio is going to end up doing here in this game against them. And, of course, another thing you have to keep in mind, too, with this Ohio Bobcats team is the fact that, with that offense, we've also seen their defense actually gradually improve throughout the course of the season. Can they kind of keep that going here in this one? And the all-important question, obviously, is going to end up being the status of Curtis Rourke. Knee injury, of course, a few weeks ago, suffered against Ball State. We're going to have to see, or suffered against Ball State last week. We're going to have to see if he's able to play. C.J. Harris replaced him. That's a huge, huge question mark looming over this game, whether Curtis Rourke will play for Ohio. I think, obviously, if he does play and he's ruled in, you're going to see Ohio money come in. And I would say wait and see if you can get Bowling Green at the best number, because I certainly lean to the dog either way. But obviously, Ohio is definitely a greater risk in this game to lose without Curtis Rourke, who has just been really terrific throughout MAC play. So his status pertinent when it comes to this game. What do you think here, C-Mac? This is pretty much the de facto MAC East division title game, Bowling Green, Ohio.
Yeah, that was a big win for Bowling Green, but I thought that, we talked about that Toledo team is a pretty flawed, quarterbacks in and out as well. The big key here with Bowling Green, just on their offense, is McDonald, like you talked about. The guy is just he's had these good games and he's just looked horrible. Picks, it just looks like two different players at times. He's kind of done that his whole career there. Ohio's just been red hot. I get why people maybe don't want to be off. I think they've covered 6 or 7 in a row. Last time they lost October 1st. So, but the big question mark you talked about is with Rourke there. He's the key. I think Ohio's a little bit better defense, and obviously their offense has been good. And they took care of business against last week, 32-18. So tricky here is just get under 7. Maybe you like Ohio, but Rourke's got to be in. See, with Bowling Green with that big win with huge dogs, and this number would have been bigger. That good win, this could have been, I thought it would be over 10, maybe, or around there if they lost. So tough here. I'm going to wait. I'm just going to wait on this one a little bit. I don't know if I pull the trigger. Maybe it's one you just watch or bet live in the end.
I think if Rourke is in, I gravitate over. If Rourke is out, I gravitate Bowling Green. That's probably where I stand in terms of how I'm going to bet this game, depending on whether he's in or out for Ohio. But obviously, big stakes Tuesday night in action.
Real quick, if he's in under a touchdown, I'd lean Ohio a little bit. They've been just that good. I think they could, win by a touchdown.
The thing is, too, look, I'm not going to use the term letdown spot in a game where you could go to the MAC championship game. It shouldn't be for Bowling Green. They should be up for this, but the way that game went against Toledo, the roller coaster, the emotional roller coaster, it may be difficult still for them. Even with everything that's on the line here, it could be difficult for Bowling Green to roar back a week later and play, that well again against, I think, a team that's better than Toledo, honestly, Ohio. So, again, we'll see if Rourke is a go for Ohio. All right, Ball State, Miami, Ohio. The other game, not so important, obviously, on Tuesday night in MACtion. Miami 3-point home favorites, 44. Being the total in this game. When you look at this matchup here, Miami and Ball State, both of these teams, 3-4 in conference play. Both of them, though, 5-6 overall. So while this isn't obviously MAC championship game, stakes or aspirations, bowl eligibility is at stake for both of these teams here in this game. So a pretty important game when you factor it in between Miami and Kent State. Miami comes back to beat Northern Illinois 29-23. It was a gutsy win, I guess you could say, for Miami last week. Look, Avion Smith was the quarterback, not great, but the key was they got the run game going, and that made all the difference in the world against Northern Illinois, allowing them to pick up the victory in that game. Ball State, I'll tell you what, the game against Ohio last week, Curtis Rourke goes out, you think, Ohio in trouble. C.J. Harris played okay, and the Ball State defense still didn't have many answers, and their offense just didn't do enough. They lose 32-18 to Ohio last week in that game. We'll see if they can respond here this week against Miami. When you look at the matchup here, I think for Ball State, they've been pretty balanced this year, run and pass. And I will say this, they've struggled a little bit more to defend the pass of Miami. So that's definitely something that you would be a little bit concerned about here going into this game. The Miami offense just hasn't been an offense that I've been overly impressed with this year. You look at on their home field, Conor Mac, it's not been a great home field for Miami this year. They lose 37-21 at home to Ohio as 2-point home dogs, 7.5-point home favorites against Western Michigan. They lose the game outright, 16-10. They only beat Kent State by 3. But specifically in the home favorites role, and then earlier in the year, Robert Morris, FCS opponent, laying a big number. They only won by 17. They've been bad in the home favorite role, in particular here, Miami. I kind of lean Ball State here. I think it's a coin flip game, and in a game like this, I think you take the points with Ball State. You just hope Paddock has one of his good games, not one of his bad games. But Ball State has been a solid underdog until they played Ohio. But before the Ohio loss last week, Ball State had been a pretty good underdog, catching points. I certainly lean in their direction, Ball State, in this game, +3. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, this seems like the the ultimate kind of coin flip, these two teams. A little bit similar. Both don't have great quarterbacks. Maybe Paddock's a little bit, throws it a little bit more, obviously, but both these teams want to run it. Decent defenses. I think Miami, Ohio's is a little bit better, maybe. But this game, everything for it, like you talked about, for a bowl game. I know this total is low, but these two teams have been in the MAC. The only thing is, these totals and these unders, the Cardinals are last 25 or 20-7. The Redhawks all year have been under. They're 9-3. So, but they've had high totals. We're talking MAC totals probably in the 60s. Now we're catching a 45. But I think it's just going to be, kind of a dogfight type game. Cold weather, back and forth. Flip it that way. I lean under a little bit, at 45. So, I'm going to stay off on the other side. I think it could be anything. You mentioned it. Miami home, not very good lately, but good the last few years, at home. Yeah. And Ball State hasn't been good here. Last 5 times they've come here, 1-4 against the number. But the ultimate, coin flip, it seems like.
The ultimate coin flip. Sounds kind of like a game maybe you do stay away from. But like I said, if I do get involved, it'll be small bet, pizza money type of amount, but maybe Ball State, certainly the way I would lean at least. All right, we go to Thanksgiving Thursday night. And this has become kind of a tradition on Thanksgiving Thursday night. They always put one college football game on Thanksgiving night along with the 3 NFL games. And it's usually the Egg Bowl. And it is once again this year, Mississippi State and Ole Miss, the annual Egg Bowl rivalry game. And, of course, it's rivalry week in college football, so you got lots of rivalry games as usual this week. Ole Miss, 2.5-point home favorites, 58.5 being the total in this game. There's no way I'm laying points with Ole Miss. It's just not going to be the case. I mean, this team looks like they're ready to tap out. I don't want to say tap out like give up. Like it's in a rivalry game. I think the effort should be there in theory, but I'm just saying their execution doesn't seem to be there. And this defense of Lane Kiffin's is getting worse, not better, as the season has progressed. That has become crystal clear. I mean, remember they started off the season with some of these great performances where, they were really starting off the season strong. They shut out Georgia. Well, we're finding out Georgia Tech's terrible. But really, ever since then, it's been a steady decline for this defense. They give up 27 to Tulsa. Don't cover that game. 28 to Vanderbilt, 34 to Auburn's offense, which has been nothing to write home about all season, 45 to LSU. They get shredded. 28 to a mediocre A&M offense, barely survived with victory there. And then they lose the game to Alabama. They give up 30 to Bryce Young and company. And then they just get absolutely just ripped apart by Arkansas, 42-27 last week. And you know what's concerning, too, about Ole Miss? It's not only the defense falling apart here down the stretch, it's the penalties. It's the mistakes. I mean, you're just getting so many more, turnovers, mistakes, just bad coverage down in the secondary. I mean, it's everything right now. It's just the kind of things that you look at for a team where signs that it's going off the rails a little bit. And now look, they're 8-3. They should still look at it and say, hey, it's been a solid season. But when I look at this team right now, I see a team that's getting certainly worse, not better in the defensive end. And that definitely concerns me going into this matchup here against Mississippi State. You look at Mississippi State coming into this, I think from a scheduling standpoint, a little bit of a benefit for them. Ole Miss has to play Arkansas, a tough game in the SEC last week. A solid team, good team when they're playing their best, that is Arkansas. And Mississippi State gets to play East Tennessee. And they obviously crushed them 56-7. So I think it actually gives the Mississippi State coaching staff more of an opportunity to prep better for Ole Miss. Because I guarantee you, they're not prepping for East Tennessee State last week. They're probably already starting to prepare for this matchup here in the Egg Bowl against Ole Miss. So it's probably a coaching and situational advantage just based on the way the schedule lays out. Ole Miss has to play a tough Arkansas game last week, and here's Mississippi State. They get a layup against East Tennessee State. They're probably already fast tracking their preparation for Ole Miss all of last week, Mississippi State. So I am definitely leaning strongly to the Bulldogs. Haven't bet it yet, but I'm sure I'll end up on Mississippi State here in this game. I'm certainly not laying points with a bad defense right now. And Jackson Dart's tried to do the best he can, and I don't know if he's enough, and that offense is enough to make up for the warts defensively we're seeing from the Rebels right now. What do you think here, C-Mac? Egg Bowl.
Yeah, it should be a good one. You talked about it, rivalry week. I think in Mississippi State, too, a little bit has the better defense. They just haven't been good on the road, though, all year long. But I think this game is tight. Yeah, who put it in the chat there? Bama boy, 700 yards. Yeah, it's just crazy. They should have been in the 40s though too. But when you have all those penalties like you talked about, Ian, 12 penalties, they had 2 lost fumbles, Dart threw a pick, just killed those drives. Because both teams ran for like 350 yards or more, maybe even 400 on Arkansas. So they got to clean that up. Both these teams, I know Mississippi State's been great to the under on the road, but maybe these defenses are so bad it gets over. I just think in a rivalry type game, it could be tight. Everything tightens up a little bit. I'm going to wait on this total because I lean under because I think it might be a little bit too high. But it's hard to say that after you just saw that Ole Miss defense get tore up. But yeah, I lean the Bulldogs a little bit and under right now.
And they're betting this thing under 63.5 down to 59.5 right now. But I actually get more interested in an over if it keeps dropping a little bit because, and even the Mississippi State defense, they give up 45 to Georgia, 33 to Auburn, 30 down. I mean, it's not like they've been as good either down the stretch, but Ole Miss to me has been mistake prone. And I'm reading some stuff too. Will Rogers has been the quarterback now. I think this is his 3rd year now facing Ole Miss. He's lost the first 2. And makes you think, well, maybe Ole Miss just has their number. But I think this is Mississippi State's best chance because Will Rogers is a better quarterback now than he was. And you're not facing Matt Corral, Ole Miss, anymore. He's gone.
Yeah.
You're facing, I think, a little bit of a weaker quarterback anyway, and certainly a defense that's very vulnerable right now for Ole Miss. So I think this is a real good chance. And I think they want this one. Not that Ole Miss doesn't, but I think Mississippi State really wants this one. This senior class led by the quarterback, Will Rogers. Do you think they want to go 0-3 to Ole Miss in their career in this rivalry? No. I think that's something that will fuel Mississippi State in this game. And like I said, I definitely lean Bulldogs here if I'm going to bet the side in this game. All right, NC State and North Carolina. We move now to Friday. ACC rivalry action here. North Carolina, 6.5-point home favorites, 56 the total. I think you got to take the dog or pass here, honestly, because North Carolina's in one of these situations, and we saw it last week, and I didn't really think it over as much as I should have. They're laying 21 against Georgia Tech, obviously a horrendous loss for North Carolina, absolutely brutal. But then again, I started to think, it's like, how could they lose that game? But then I remembered, well, wait a minute, they pretty much clinched that division already. It's not like there's a whole lot at stake. I mean, they're pretty much locked into playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. It's pretty much a fait accompli right now because they're 6-1 in conference. Nobody can catch them. Pitt, Duke, and Georgia Tech are too far behind. You figured, with North Carolina, maybe not a whole lot to play for. They were going to maybe have a stumble at some point, but you still shouldn't lose that. I don't care what the situation is, what you've locked up, what you've clinched, and what you haven't clinched. You shouldn't lose to Georgia Tech, period. You should not. And that was a horrible loss last week for North Carolina in that football game. See if they can rebound here, have the response that we hope for in this matchup here against NC State. You would think they're a little bit more screwed in mentally with this being a rivalry situation here against NC State. On the flip side, NC State, look, that's 2 losses in a row, 21-20 to Boston College as favorites. They lose 25-10 to Louisville. This offense, ever since Devin Leary got injured, it hasn't been the same. Jack Chambers, pathetic. MJ Morris not available last week against Louisville, and they had to turn to Ben Finley at quarterback, and 16-35, 201 yards in that game. I mean, we haven't seen enough of him to really trust him. So, yeah, and in theory, I lean dog, and that's certainly the better defense, NC State. And even then, the NC State defense has shown some cracks in the armor the last few weeks, but they still are. You got to believe the better defense here over North Carolina. Is that enough? We'll see. Lean NC State, but man, I don't love their quarterback situation at all. But I'll tell you what, it's not like we loved Georgia Tech's offense last week, and they still moved the ball against North Carolina. So maybe whoever's at quarterback, Finley, Morris, Chambers, I mean, it's really up in the air who's going to start for Dave Doran here at quarterback, but maybe someone is capable of moving a ball against a North Carolina defense that, as we all know, has had their share of issues all season long. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, no shit. We talked about it with, I wanted Sims in. Obviously, he's just going to be out for the season. We talked on Saturday. But for Gibson to do that, you mean they had nothing to play? They walked through that game. They looked like, they didn't want to do it. They didn't give a fuck. It seemed like North Carolina in that
not
run.
Mentally there, 100%.
Yeah, they
right.
were not.
I saw that. Yep.
not mentally there at all. Yeah, NC State just seems like they're limping here to the finish line. The problem is, I'd love this to be a little bit over a touchdown. There's no way I can lay points. I talk about it every time. I think you look at NC State here or nothing. I think they still have the better defense, but in the end, I don't know. This one, it's dog or pass for me here with NC State. You just can't. Don't lay points. I mean, I think in the long run, I think you're going to be profit. I think everyone has been.
I think that's where
when they've been a dog, they've won. So.
That's true. And here we go, NC State in the dog roll. We think that certainly based on the numbers, if you look at all the key defensive numbers, I mean, NC State in terms of pass yards per game allowed, rush yards per game allowed, total yards per game allowed, all of their numbers on the defensive side are better than North Carolina's. And maybe that's enough to keep them competitive. Certainly, we're both leaning to the Wolfpack a little bit. Baylor and Texas now on front. Now, these games, by the way, that game, North Carolina, NC State, this game, and the next series of games are all Friday games, all right? Black Friday this week. And a lot of them are day games because of it being a holiday, so make sure you're aware of that. Baylor and Texas is one of them. Texas, 8.5-point home favorites, 55.5 the total. So the first thing you look at is, man, this feed seems like a lot of points. How can we lay it with Texas? I'll tell you how you can lay it with Texas. Baylor looked completely, like you talk about just gut-wrenched, heartbroken, just mentally shot after pouring their fucking everything into that TCU game last week. To lose that game the way they did, a fire drill field goal attempt at the end of the game where they run the ball, TCU up the middle, try to make it closer. They have no timeouts left, and all of a sudden they got to run the kicking unit, run the field goal unit onto the field, make sure everyone's in position. Remember, if they go false start there, they're probably fucked. And I mean, they had to just execute that one play perfectly. Nothing could go wrong. They got everybody in position. Nobody jumped. No false start. They got the snap, the hold, the field goal kick was perfect. And I saw they showed several camera shots after that game ended of Baylor players, and they've just got their heads down on the field, just, arms over their face. I mean, I don't trust Baylor one bit in this spot, not after the way they lost that game last week. That was heartbreaking. That they had the undefeated TCU Horned Frogs on the ropes, and they did a Denny Green, essentially. Let them off the hook is what exactly they did last week. That would worry me a lot about what now. Look, this is Texas. This is a team that should get you fired up. This is a team that you're playing that should have you able to pick yourself up off the mat. But just when you saw the visuals of the Baylor players after that just crushing loss to TCU, you wonder if their heads are in this game. You really do. Are they, especially with less than a full week to bounce back? This is not Saturday to Saturday. You got to play a day earlier on a Friday. That does worry me here about taking the points with Baylor. It feels like a lot to be laying with Texas, but we know when Quinn Ewers is on top of his game at quarterback, and look, he's had some mediocre performances too, but we know he can be really good. We know that Bijan Robinson, when he gets the run game going, can be very, very dangerous. In theory, Baylor's run defense has been okay this year. So matchup-wise, it's not terrible for Baylor, but just the situationals, the way they lost that game last week, and all the optics that I saw of those individual camera shots of the Baylor players, they all looked like they were crying and it's almost like somebody died, honestly. The reaction after that loss was like somebody in the family died for some of those players after losing that game the way they did. So that is enough to keep me off Baylor right there. I don't know if I'll take Texas, but it's certainly enough to keep me off Baylor. You lose a game like that 6 days later, am I trusting you to be fully dialed in and locked in? I'm not so sure. What do you think here, Connor? Interesting handicap here, Baylor, Texas.
Yeah, it is. And you talked about an early game on Friday. Yeah, what a tough loss. I thought Baylor was going to win that game. I thought that was those possessions when you had the lead after TC scored the touchdown, it's just a quick 3 and out. I was just like, oh, man, they're fucked. And it ended that way. So they covered, but I had a money line as well. But in this one, you talked about, we mentioned on Saturday, the lone thing we were worried about, Kansas just isn't the same team. They got to the 6 wins. The defense just gashed. You mentioned Robinson ran for like 250. And Texas looked good. It's just, a quick bounce back, but is 8 too much? And it will be, maybe look Texas first half if you think they're going to come out flat. Baylor is and not into this one. These between these two, though, the last few years, going through it last night, Baylor beat them last year by a touchdown. It's kind of gone back and forth. Then they've lost in Austin, beat them in Waco, lost in Austin. And it's basically been by a touchdown the last 4 years. Yeah, interesting one here. Maybe this one you get on live, see how Baylor looks, early on. And if they take care of the ball, I think they should be in it. But, tough one here. I have nothing right now on Monday here.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Anybody that looks at this line thinks it's a little bit high on Texas, but then you factor in what happened last week. And, again, you truly wonder if this is going to be a Baylor team that's even going to show up, honestly. And they should show up because you would think they should show up because it's Texas, but tell those kids that when they poured their guts out on the field last week against TCU and lost in just one of the most gut-wrenching fashions imaginable. It tells you, it's a reminder to everybody, NFL, college football, you can't leave time on the clock against these good offenses and these good quarterbacks anymore. Even if you leave them like 30 seconds, 40 seconds, look at Mahomes again last night for Kansas City in the Sunday night game. They'll make you pay. I mean, you've got to try to just really drain that clock and not give them that opportunity. And Max Duggan has become one of those quarterbacks. In the clutch, he gets it done. And he did it again last week for TCU in that game.
All year long.
Yep.
You keep rolling, keep winning.
Yeah. Take a pounding. He's running the ball. He takes some big hits, too, when he takes off and runs with the football. And he's just got up. He's a tough as nails kid, and he's a clutch kid. He's made every big play this year for TCU, and Baylor found that out the hard way last week. All right, let's go to Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan. A little Friday action here. We've got Central Michigan 2-point road favorites, 53.5 being the total in this game. Interesting matchup here, but you look at the fact that in the MAC standings going into this matchup, it's really these two teams. For Eastern Michigan, it's obviously very important. They play Toledo. They're second in the division. Unfortunately, they are not going to be able to catch Toledo for first place. So that's the only issue there because they lost head-to-head to Toledo. So they are out of the division race, but they're playing better football here the last month or so. Eastern Michigan, 3 of their last 4 they've won and covered. The only straight-up loss was a 3-point loss to Toledo at home. Central Michigan, they're a weird team to figure out. They didn't look good against Akron, but barely won that game, blown out by Bowling Green. Back-to-back pretty nice wins against Northern Illinois and Buffalo. And then it's 9.5-point favorites against Western Michigan. You lose 12-10. Offense doesn't work. A bad Western Michigan team, but that's what rivalry games can do sometimes. Weird things can happen. So this game is just really, really difficult. But I will say this, the money's come in on Central. Eastern Michigan opened 1-point favorites, and now Central's laying 2 on the road. When it comes to Eastern Michigan as a dog, or just you bet the underdog in Eastern Michigan games, whether it's Eastern Michigan or whether it's their opponent, you're usually doing pretty well. So I'm certainly leaning to the Eagles now with them as a home dog. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, I do too here a little bit. One thing, Central has owned them, though, a little bit the last few years. But Central Michigan has trouble scoring. They're not doing anything. We talked, though, on the other side. It's not that I'm crazy about Eastern Michigan. I said they don't really do anything well. Remember last week? But as a dog, just taken, they seem to get it done. They got a bunch of seniors here in this last game. I'd have to be on them. I think people are just going off, Central to pass a little bit. This could be a good game for them. And maybe, but I saw Central all year. Just been strange. Had glimpses in a couple games, but against shitty teams. In the end, I just got to roll with Eastern here at home.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll say this, Taylor Powell, when he's healthy, he's been okay for Eastern Michigan, and he's been with Missouri. I think he was with Troy as well. He's been with a couple different schools before going to Eastern Michigan, and he's been solid actually. He's been getting better every week at quarterback for Eastern Michigan. And Richardson should be better than what we saw last week against Western Michigan in that game. I think both offenses in a game like this will be better. I'm kind of leaning over 53.5 as well in this game, and I definitely lean home underdog. All right, Toledo and Western Michigan. We've got Toledo 7.5, 8-point road favorites, 52.5, 53 the total in this game. Look, I have not been fond of Western Michigan. I don't think I've bet Western Michigan at all this season, quite honestly. They can't even make a bowl game. They're 4-7, but I'm taking them here. The Toledo fade as favorites is still on for me as far as I'm concerned, especially now that they're going on the road for this game. You look at on the road here for Toledo here in recent games. Buffalo, they lose outright as favorites. Eastern Michigan, 4-point road favorites. They win by 3. Ball State at home, 13.5-point favorites, win by 7. They lose outright to Bowling Green last week in a stunner, 42-35 in that game. They're really fortunate, and they should thank their lucky stars, this Toledo team, that they're in a West Division that hasn't been that great in the MAC, and they're very fortunate they beat Eastern Michigan head-to-head, or else there would still be a chance for Eastern Michigan to pass Toledo for first. So Toledo's locked in to the MAC championship game. They can't be caught. I think that probably has played a part as well, Conor Mac, in this little malaise with the Rockets here down the stretch. There's not been a whole lot at stake for them. They've known for a little bit that they're going to be in the MAC championship game. Yeah, for me, there's a Western Michigan bet. Now, am I rushing to, endorse Western Michigan and that brutal offense, which scored only 9 points against Bowling Green, 16 against Miami, 14 against Ohio? I mean, 21 points is their high watermark in the last 5 conference games. I mean, it hasn't been a good Western Michigan offense. I get it. And Bourget is giving us performances to forget. As I've said repeatedly here on this show. I mean, last week, even in the victory against Central Michigan, 12-10, they won in spite of the quarterback. 7 of 19 for Bourget, 102 rushing yards. Thank goodness Sean Tyler ran for 177 rushing yards. And look, this Toledo run defense is leaking. They're giving up 152 rushing yards per game. That's why I think Western can actually get the run game going. Bourget doesn't have to do a lot, and it'll allow them to hang around in this game. Move the chains, less possessions, and make this a tough margin for Toledo to get. So hold your nose, because Western Michigan's offense is pretty rough, but Toledo as favorites, laying points has been even rougher. So give me Western Michigan here, plus the points. Conor Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning here. See, this game seems to me, if Toledo comes to play, which I don't know, like you said, not much here to play for, I could see them just winning by, 2 or 3 touchdowns. They bring their A game, but they don't. This could be very close. And like you mentioned, for Western, just run it. Just keep running it all game long. Bourget is not very good, like you mentioned, but he didn't throw a pick last game, so he just needs to continue to do that. And also, Western in these games, their defense has been better. The last few weeks is decent. They're not a team that can get up and down and trade scores here. So, yeah, I lean the dog here a little bit, and I lean the under. I don't think Gleason's that great. I mean, he threw it around a little bit, but he threw a couple picks. So, yeah, I'm with you here. Western, I lean them and the under.
Yeah, you're right. It's a bit of a quarterback shuffle, of course, for Toledo as well this year. That's another thing that's, dicey when you're laying more than a touchdown on the road. All right, next up as we continue along here, we've got Utah State and Boise State next up. Boise State, 16-point home favorites here, 53 being the total in this game. I'm not laying it with Boise, and that Boise is another one of these teams late in the season here. They're in the Mountain West Championship game. They've locked up the Mountain Division. Nobody can catch them for that spot. It's theirs. So where's the enthusiasm here to lay 16 or, to win by a huge margin here for Boise State when they've already locked up there? I know they're undefeated in conference play, 7-0 Boise State, but, where is that motivation here to win by a big margin? It was a wire-to-wire point spread cover for me, and I think Connor kind of liked it as well. Wyoming plus the points against Boise last week. Boise just escaping by the skin of their teeth, 20-17 in that game. Now, they have been obviously a team that on the blue turf, over the last few years, they haven't been as good as home favorites. Although since they made the quarterback change, we have seen them blow out some teams at home, Fresno, San Diego State, Colorado State. They did lose to BYU, though, on this blue turf, the home field, Albertson Stadium, as 8.5-point favorites. They lost to BYU. I think I would lean to Utah State a little bit here. Utah State now against Boise, they have been owned. There's no question. 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread. Boise State, 5 straight meetings against Utah State, including 27-3 last year at Utah State. But I remember that game because I took Utah State when they were really playing well early with Blake Anderson and Bonner at quarterback. And Utah State kept moving the ball, and they missed a field goal or they turned it over. They actually outgained Boise State. They were +4 in total yardage. Can you believe that? Utah State was +4 in total yardage last year against Boise State, even though they lost 27-3. So you talk about a crazy box score there. I got to lean to the points here with the Aggies. And I will say this, their offense, even with the injury to Bonner, it's been pretty solid with the under the guidance, I should say, of Cooper Legas. He's been okay. For them, he's pretty decent throwing the football. Rely on Calvin Tyler as well, and the run game for Utah State. The Boise State defense is something that's also improved, but Utah State's a pass-heavy offense here, no question. Or actually, they do run it, I should say, a little bit more. They try to stay balanced, and that's probably where they can do a little bit more of their damage. We know the Boise State defense is good, but in the cold of Laramie, Wyoming was able to do a decent job. Get that run game going a bit, move the football a little bit. And that's all we need from Utah State when you're getting this kind of points. So I'm definitely Utah State or pass when it comes to this game. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, shout out to the chat. Shout out to Big Show with the gifting the membership, Bo Jackson for getting it. Shout out to just my 2 cents too. I saw up on the top earlier, became a member. Shout out to everyone in the chat that's become a member. Appreciate it. Get in the green because you're going to be on the back end. We're already switching colors and getting shit rolling here. So become a member, $4.99. That's it. I won't have to say it again.
It's worth it. $4.99 a month. That's all it is. Yep.
Yeah. I think this might be too many. The one thing that I just keep thinking when I was looking last night is just they've owned them. And Utah State's had some better teams the last few years, and Boise's just kicked their ass. Yeah, that was tough in Laramie. We loved Wyoming. On the flip side, we both like Utah State. They took care of business, and that over came through at home. If they can't make mistakes, I think they could stay in it. This one, I see Boise winning by like 17 or 20, or this just be a touchdown. I think it's too many, so I lean with Utah State. I think they can do enough. Legas threw a couple picks there. If he could stay clean, that would really help it out. But he can throw it around a little bit. And you mentioned Tyler can run it. So, yeah, if I had to here, I'd take the points with Utah State.
All right, next up, Territorial Cup. Arizona State Sun Devils, Arizona State Wildcats. We've got Arizona here, 4-point home favorites, 64 the total in this game. I think it's very difficult to back Arizona State right now. 0-4 ATS, their last 4 games. They're actually 1-4 straight up their last 5. The only victory was an 8-point non-covering victory against Colorado. And Colorado's brutal. That's a bad look, believe it or not, only beating Colorado by 8 points. That's what happened with Arizona State. They lost to Stanford 15-14, lose to UCLA by 14, lose by double digits at Wazoo, and then just got absolutely crushed at home by Oregon State 31-7 last week. And I was on the Beavers in that game. I said, I think they're just a dead fade right now. I think this team is ready to call it a year, quite honestly. 3-8, they're not going anywhere. No bowl game. Fired head coach earlier this year, Herm Edwards. And by the way, the coaching staff that's there now, they don't give 2 shits about preparing for football games for Arizona State. They know Arizona State's going to look elsewhere for their head coach. They're preparing their resumes for their next job. That's where the focus is. It's not getting these kids ready to play football every week. So it's just a bad situation off the field. They're not playing well on the field. No defense either every week, it seems, lately for Arizona State. I mean, it's Arizona or nothing for me. And I think Arizona might be worth laying the points here. I know they lost to Washington State last week, 31-20, but anybody that knows situational handicapping knows that after the huge upset against UCLA, there was a chance they were going to fall flat last week against Washington State. That's exactly what happened. They're a better team than they showed last week. They were good enough to beat UCLA. I think Jaden DeLore and the offense, they bounce back. They have a better game. The defense is still a little sketchy for Arizona, but right now, what we saw, we didn't see much from Arizona State's offense against Oregon State last week. Another Bourget at quarterback, Trenton Bourget, performance to forget again for Arizona State. So I haven't bet it yet, but it's on my list of games I'm looking at, considering, and that's definitely Arizona -4 in this game. The line seems short to me. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, I lean that way too here a little bit with the Wildcats. You know what happened with them? I liked Washington State. You mentioned after their upset, Delore was just the picks. Washington State, I thought, is a pretty good defense. I mean, he had 4 interceptions. And on the other side, Oregon State just manhandled Arizona State. That team, like you talked about, did not look very good. I watched a lot of that game. They're not very good. I think Arizona has a better offense. I know this is the rivalry week here. This always could be close. So I lean them here. And I think we got to have some points in this one. So lean Arizona and lean some points.
Yeah, I lean over. I just worry, is Arizona State going to get enough for me? But I definitely think Arizona.
Maybe. The thing is, Arizona's defense, who knows? Can they score, in the 20s?
But I'm with you, over nothing. I don't want the under in this game. Arkansas, Missouri now in the SEC. We've got Arkansas, 3-point road favorites, 3.5, 55.5, 56 the total in this game. Money coming in a little bit on this Missouri Tigers team. They just obviously took care of business as we would expect them to against New Mexico State, 45-14 last week. Good response after getting drilled by Tennessee. Arkansas, look, pretty good performance from them. A little misleading, though, because as we said, Ole Miss rolled up, 700 yards of offense. And unfortunately for Ole Miss, they had 2 lost fumbles. Jackson Dart throws an interception, and that was a big part of the difference in the football game right there. -3 in turnovers for Ole Miss against Arkansas last week. So Arkansas did, get that turnover luck in their favor in that game. But the fact still remains, with KJ Jefferson back at quarterback, they're certainly a lot better. Raheem Sanders was just a monster last week. 232 rushing yards, just destroyed Ole Miss run defense last week in that game. See if he can carry that over here against a Missouri team that, I'll be honest, their defense has been better this year. I mean, Tennessee got away from them there, but bad, shoddy efforts defensively have been few and far between this year for this Missouri team. This is a tough one because you've got Arkansas off this LSU Ole Miss gauntlet, and I think they were inspired in both games. And now you're going on the road. You're facing a little bit of a weaker team. You've already clinched bowl eligibility, by the way, with that win against Ole Miss. And Missouri's playing for bowl eligibility here at 5-6. They want it. I think spot-wise, edge Missouri, lean Missouri for me right now. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I think Missouri here too a little bit. I think Arkansas in the end with Jefferson could make the plays and are the better team, but not easy here to go on the road and win by a touchdown. So I like the points with them. You mentioned that game with Tennessee. It just got away from the defense. Hey, we can get to Tennessee. Look at what happened with them on Saturday. They handled New Mexico State real easy, which we all thought they would. In Columbia here, I like Missouri. I think they keep this game close. Arkansas defense, like you were mentioning real quick, the 700 yards, that's a good thing with the Missouri offense that's just okay. But I think this game will be tight, so I'd rather be on the points.
I also think this game could go over the number at 55.5 because I think when you look at Missouri, their offense is the concern. With Brady Cook, it's not been a great offense, but I think they're taking a step down in defensive class. Arkansas still has issues defensively right now. And they did put up 20. I thought they did play one of their better games against Tennessee, Missouri. And I think they played, obviously they should move the ball up and down. And it was New Mexico State, but still it gives them confidence. They put up a big number, 45 points. I think that game could get over that 55.5 as well, as long as weather's not bad between Arkansas and Missouri on Friday. I think it's a buy low for the Missouri offense. I think they're going to have a pretty solid game against, a defense that's a little shaky. All right, New Mexico and Colorado State. You've got Colorado State 7.5-point home favorites here, 35 the total in this game. I mean, New Mexico is totally unbackable. Cannot back New Mexico. Offense is brutal. They're 0-5 straight up, 1-4 against the spread on the road this year. Now they got to go to Fort Collins. Good luck with that. But my goodness, are we ready to lay 7.5 with Colorado? I mean, this is a clear pass. I mean, New Mexico's unfreaking backable. They've 0-8 straight up, 1-7 against the spread, 0 offense. The quarterback situation's a disaster. Kendrick was benched. They put in this other kid, CJ Montez. He's not been any better. They can't run the ball. They just have no offense whatsoever. They get crushed by San Diego State at senior night as well for New Mexico last week. 34-10 they lose at home to San Diego State. Now you're going to ask me to trust them to go on the road in a meaningless game against Colorado State? No way I'm taking New Mexico. But I can't lay 7.5 with Colorado State either. They've lost 4 in a row. They've been favored twice this year. Do you know what happened? 14-point home favorites against Middle Tennessee, lost outright. 6-point home favorites against Hawaii, didn't cover, only won by 4. Those are their 2 times laying points. You want to lay 7.5, knock yourself out. Not me. Easiest pass on the board for me. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, this is not one I'm probably going to get involved with here. New Mexico, by the way, opened that first half good. Goose egg, though, second half. Couldn't get a point. They scored a touchdown, at least probably. I think they would have covered that game. I'm not sure in the end, but nothing in the second half. Colorado State, they got blitzed. It was like, 30-0, and they scored 12 or whatever late, or 13 in the fourth, a couple touchdowns. So, if I really had to free bet this, I'm not going to back it. I'd take the points if I had to, but yeah, no way.
Away. I both agree. I'd stay away from that game. For the goodness of your bankroll and your health, stay away from that game. All right, Nebraska and Iowa, Big Ten action. This is an annual Black Friday. Every year, Black Friday, these two teams play each other, Nebraska and Iowa. Iowa 10.5-point home favorites, 38 the total. I'm definitely giving the Dogs some consideration here, the Huskers at plus 10.5. You actually look at series history, Connor, the last few years, Iowa, Nebraska, they play every year this rivalry since 2018. The last 4 meetings, we've seen a 3-point Iowa win, another 3-point Iowa win in 2019, a 6-point Iowa win 2 years ago, and a 7-point Iowa win last year. I mean, Nebraska's been there, single score, single possession games each of the last 4 years. And I'm still in the same position as I always am with this Iowa team. I'm not going to trust this offense laying double digits. I'm not. Now, granted, they played a little bit better against Purdue and Wisconsin, winning those games, covering the number, and they are on a little bit of a point spread hot streak, 4 straight covers for Iowa coming into this game. But it's still not an offense I'm ready to say, yeah, let's lay double digits here. We feel confident. No. Spencer Petras has been, like I say, marginally better in recent weeks. They still can't run the football with a great deal of consistency week in and week out. That's something that would concern you going into this game against Nebraska. Now, Nebraska has their own issues. Obviously, they've already fired a coach this year. They've already got, a 3-win season with no bowl eligibility, obviously. But they got Casey Thompson back from injury, Nebraska, which is good to see against Wisconsin. Now, was it a great performance? No. Only scored 14 points. But you know what I'm impressed with and why I think the team has not tapped out Nebraska, why I think they're still there and giving an effort, is the way they competed on defense against Wisconsin last week. That tells me this team is not tapped out. They've not mentally checked out. And I think in a rivalry game like this is probably the spot on the schedule that Nebraska looks at and say, look, it's been a bad season, dismal season. Scott Frost got canned. We can make something special out of this season, at least if we end on a high note here in our rivalry game against Iowa, and they've given Iowa fits each of the last 4 years. So I like the 10.5 a little bit here with Nebraska. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, when this opened up, I get why people, some people want to jump on Iowa, but, now at 10.5, you mentioned it. Dog's been good here, 4-0 the last 4 years. I like what I've seen out of Nebraska, and just the defense. They're just at least coming to play. And this total, it's too high, too. This is an under. We just saw them play Minnesota, 13-10. It didn't get over the 32.
So much for my over 31.5 and the 8-1 over run for totals of 33 or less in college football. Yeah.
You know what, though? They moved it. And there was turnover after turnover. They had yards in that game.
They did.
That probably should have gone over, but it didn't. Yeah, Nebraska and the points here. Iowa, the better team, maybe win it. But when these teams get together, it's always tight. And I'm not playing the over. Under or nothing here.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chase White, thank you for the comments. Best show ever. We appreciate it. It's not the last class, though, my friend. We're on next week. We've got conference championship week next week. So we'll be on Monday breaking down those games. And we'll be on it for at least one, if not maybe 2 bowl shows in December. So for hitting the books. So we still got a few shows left. Not our last class, and that's hopefully a good thing for all our viewers. All right, UCLA taking on Cal next up. We've got UCLA 10-point road favorites here, 60.5 the total in this one. So UCLA now, you look at the Arizona loss, you look at just the emotional, draining game they played in the rivalry matchup against USC, and man, was that a fun football game. I feel for DTR being on the losing end of that. Now he has to take some blame. He threw a couple of picks that were just not very good, and they ended up being the difference in the end. But he still played his tail off. He was taking some punishment, and he kept on playing through it. Just a phenomenal college football game. Back and forth. UCLA loses 48-45. So playoff dreams gone. Rose Bowl dreams gone. Pac-12 championship dreams gone. There's no way I'm laying 10 on the road with UCLA in this spot. Are you freaking kidding me? After what they've been through the last 2 weeks, and that defense, no, that's just not happening at all. And here's California. Say what you will. Look, they fired the offensive coordinator. They replaced him prior to the Stanford game. And was it pretty? No, but they got a win and cover against Stanford, 27-20. Jack Plummer was, he's been all right at times at the quarterback spot. It's been up and down all over the place for California. But in this home underdog role, I'm going to go back to it here. Oregon, I thought, they didn't cover in that game, but they were giving Oregon some problems for a large part of it. And then they just let it slip away in the fourth quarter. They lose by 18, just barely fail to cover. They do cover as a home dog against Washington, lose by 7, 28-21. Definitely looking at Cal. Definitely, and right now with UCLA, as far as their totals go, it's over or pass for me. And to be honest with you, Cal is the coordinator change. The new coordinator says he wants to actually push the ball down the field, be a little bit more explosive. So that might play toward an over as well in this game, over 60.5. What do you think here, Conor Mac?
Yeah, if you've watched us the last few years, if Cal's at home as a double-digit dog, you've won some good amount of money, and UCLA will score. They just can't stop anybody, and even this Cal team with Plummer can move it. And at times it's been kind of shitty, but a number like this is the home dog here, and just the ultimate, the back and forth game with SC down to it 48-45. It just seems like they're going to go there. This is one too. It depends. Everyone's different because they're bankroll. But being on here, look at it money line too. Take a piece of this money line because I think Cal could beat them outright.
I think the money line, because does UCLA really care? Or are they really, again, another one of these issues where you got to play Dr. Fraser Crane, the psychiatrist, and try to figure out if these kids are going to be dialed in, because your dreams have gone up in smoke now. UCLA the last couple of weeks, you were this close to being a playoff team, Rose Bowl, Pac-12 champions, at least being in the championship game in your conference. And in 2 weeks, it's all gone to shit. It's all out the window. Are you really going to bring it here against Cal on the road after just seeing your dreams slip away from you? And again, after just losing just a heartbreaker against your bitter rival, USC, last week. So that's why this is, and there's a bunch of these situations where one team has seen their dreams basically evaporate, and you wonder if they're going to show up. Even for a rivalry game, you wonder if they're going to show up here. And I worry about that for UCLA. All right, Florida State. Florida State, 9.5-point home favorites, 58 the total. This game is taking place on Friday night. I got to admit, and credit to Mike Norvell, credit to Florida State. I thought for sure that against the Cajuns last week, maybe they wouldn't be fully locked in. Maybe they wouldn't be focused. Well, they were focused. They did no look ahead to Florida whatsoever. They were better than the Cajuns. They drilled them early, and they cruised, and then they rolled to a 49-17 win. 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread. Florida State the last 4 weeks wins by 25, by 42, by 35, and by 28. They are by 32, I should say, against ULL. They are pulverizing teams right now. I ain't stepping in front of Florida State. Now, am I going to lay the 9.5? I don't know. What I do know is Florida did have, a bit of the look ahead syndrome. They lost to Vanderbilt, 13.5-point favorites. They lose 31-24. To me, that's what's concerning about taking the points with Florida. It feels like, now there's no longer much of a bargain to back Florida State. They're adjusting to how well this team's playing on both sides of the football right now. But there is a difference right now with these two teams defensively. Florida defensively, 100th in total yards allowed per game. Florida State, 11th. Passing yards per game allowed, Florida 86th in the country. Florida State, 4th. Florida defense, 97th in rushing yards per game allowed. Florida State, 52nd going into this game. So all the defensive numbers are much better for Florida State. It does, like, I'm not one to really love laying this kind of number in a rivalry game, but I could only take Seminoles here. They are rolling. They are playing great. And when you look at also, what's gone on here the last few years here, Florida State and Florida head-to-head. Florida has won each of the last 3. But this is the best Florida State team of the bunch. There were some bad Florida State teams each of the last 3 years. This is their best team by far. They probably come into this game thinking, we think we're better than them finally. We've lost 3 in a row to them. I wouldn't be interested in stepping in Florida State's way here, because I think not only do they want to finally beat this Florida team, they may want to send a message and beat them up. So I think it's possible they could get a double-digit win here. I don't, like I said, don't know if I'll bet Florida State, but it's the only side I would consider. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't know. I wonder if this game gets over 10. I think this just stays right here. Maybe it does, though. Then I might look at Florida. And I was faded them with Vandy. Vandy took care of business against the Gators. I think if somebody mentioned on the show, Florida, not very good, especially on the road this year, especially laying numbers. But they haven't been a dog like this. I wonder when's the last time they've almost been a 10-point dog.
Yep.
I'd have to look that up after the show. But, man, Florida State, just red hot. You got to tip their cap. The defense is playing great. Travis just consistent, not crazy. He hasn't had to be. And, they've just been kicking teams' ass lately. But I don't blame anyone, Florida State. This just seems, you do this for so long, Florida State's cruising, and then they lay a number that probably was not going to be this 3 or 4 weeks ago. And this is where, they get beat, especially if it gets over 10. They don't cover the number. Florida does, especially with a rivalry game.
Yep. They are good in the dog rule. That is the one thing you got to say about Florida. They were dogs at A&M. They won outright. 23.5-point dogs at Georgia. They covered. At Tennessee, 11.5-point dogs. They needed a backdoor score there, but they did cover. They lost by 5.
They got it. Yeah.
The dog trend is in their favor, but man, right now I think Florida State is just in that zone right now where I'd be very reluctant to go and step in front of them. Wyoming and Fresno State. Fresno State 15-point home favorites, 50.5 being the total in this game. Now, I'm always interested in Wyoming catching this many points, but again, I'm more interested at home as opposed to on the road. On the road, it can be a little bit more dicey. And Fresno State, obviously, it's very simple for them. They are on collision course to be in the Mountain West championship game. And in fact, I think they have clinched it already, because against San Diego State, remember, they came back and they beat San Diego State, stole that game from them. And because of that, they have already clinched the Mountain West division at 6-1 in the conference. So yeah, it will be a Boise State, Fresno State, Mountain West championship game next week. That'll be a good game, by the way, those two teams for sure. So what does that mean this week? It means I ain't laying 15 with Fresno. That's what it means. I mean, I'm not rushing to lay double digits with teams that have already locked everything up, and that's exactly it. Now, it is the final home regular season game, no question about that. But one thing about Wyoming is they don't impress people statistically. People are saying, how is this team? Craig Bohl's done actually a hell of a job. 7-4 with this bunch. We thought was just going to be a really tough year for them. They've had very marginal quarterback play all season long, whether it was Peasley, who was injured, and then they bring in now Jaden Clemens, and he only had 3 completions last week. But the reason why they've been competitive, 3 completions he had, believe it or not, 3 of 16 against Boise. But the reason they've been competitive is they got one hell of a running back and run game led by Titus Swen, and they've got a very good opportunistic defense that forces turnovers, gets stops when they need it. And maybe that's enough here against, like I said, a Fresno State team with really not much, if anything, at stake here in this game. Now, they've been great with Jake Haener back. We see the way they've been pulverizing teams like Nevada last week, 41-14. But they had a tough game with UNLV. They only won by 7. And I just feel in this spot with how Wyoming's defense has played a lot better than people have thought coming into this season, it might not be easy for Fresno to build a margin here in this game, especially again with the Mountain West Championship game that they've already clinched a spot in coming up next week. So definitely lean Wyoming here. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, we talk about, you just mentioned we like Wyoming at home a lot more, but Wyoming won their last 3 straight on the road. And they're not great teams, but they've gotten wins. This just seems a little bit too high here. 15, just a little bit out there. And yeah, to see Wyoming, like sometimes the stats, like you mentioned, they can't throw it, but they can run. The defense can make plays. And how much Fresno really, really cares in this one. They've been good since Hayner's back, and he looks like more like his old self, before the injury and his rolling. But I just think this might be too much. This is one I don't know if I get to the window here, but I'd be on Wyoming. I think these points is just too many here.
All right. Next up here, wow, is this ever a monster game on Friday night or Friday afternoon, I should say. They've got it at the bottom of the Friday rotation, but it's actually noon Eastern on Friday, early start time. Tulane and Cincinnati, top teams tied for first in the AAC. Cincinnati, 2-point home favorites, 46.5 the total. I love Tulane. All right. I love this team. They've cashed an over win total for me already. I do have a small flyer on them to win the AAC, which is still alive, but I can't get that freaking UCF game out of my mind. That was their biggest test of the conference season so far, and they flat out didn't get it done on defense, and UCF ran all over them in this game. And other than that, they played a downtrodden Houston team. East Carolina's been up and down. South Florida's bad. Memphis is mediocre. Tulsa's bad. They still need to show, against a Cincinnati on the road here at Nippert Stadium, that you can get it done in a big game, big spot, big opponent. I'm not fading Tulane, obviously. I love them. I've cashed with them so much this year. I got back on them last week against SMU on that Thursday night game, and they destroyed SMU, and that offense got back on track, and Michael Pratt can throw it. Michael Pratt can run. He's a very good dual-threat quarterback. Tajay Spears in the run game's good, and I keep thinking Cincinnati is a little not quite as what they've been. I know they beat up Temple, which was disappointing. I was on Temple last week, 23-3. But I don't know. I mean, they were fortunate to beat East Carolina, struggled to beat Navy, lost to Central Florida as well. I think it's a winnable game for Tulane, but they're going to have to play a whole lot better, obviously, against the run especially, than they did against UCF. And when you look at Cincinnati, it's a team that has struggled to run the football, and it's a Tulane defense that's been better against the pass, which is Cincinnati's offensive strength. So I think matchup-wise, it's actually a better matchup against Cincy for Tulane than the UCF game was. I think Tulane can win this. I lean Tulane in this one. It's certainly the only side I would look at, and I'd love to see Tulane in the AAC championship game. And it's important they win. They got a break, too, with UCF losing to Navy last week, and that is suddenly because UCF wins the tiebreaker over Tulane. But now if Tulane can somehow win this game, they're in the AAC championship game, which would be fantastic. If they lose this game, Conor Mac, they would need UCF to lose as well in order to be in the AAC championship game. So that's where we're at. And Central Florida plays South Florida. So you've got to think they're going to win that game, Central Florida. So it's basically, if Tulane's probably not going to be in the AAC championship if they lose this game, because I don't see UCF losing to South Florida. But so huge stakes, great season overall for Willie Fritz and this team regardless. But man, it would be so sweet to see them in the AAC championship game. Be one hell of a story. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, it would. I mean, in the end, I don't know if I bet this one, but yeah, Tulane's done it all year. They've been money too on the road. Obviously, it's a short number. You get the couple points, or just roll with the money line. And this would be a huge win to, take down Cincinnati, who's owned this, conference for so long. I thought that win, I know they covered against Temple. That was just a ho-hum, boring game. They were kind of walking through that. And I don't know how great this team is. Have they gotten better defensively? I think Tulane can move it on them. I think this is a damn good game. So I don't know. In the end, I might take a flyer on Tulane a little bit, but it's probably one I'm going to watch.
I'll just take money line because who cares about +2 at this point? I mean, if you're going to bet Tulane here, just take a money line. You'll get a better – you get at least plus money, +110 with the money line price now at most books. I'm going to sprinkle on Tulane. I'm just I feel in my bones that they're capable. Even on the road, it won't be easy, and obviously in Cincy, but it's at least a day game. It's not a night game. huge stakes, and it would be just amazing to see the Green Wave, obviously, in the AAC championship game. All right, the rest of the games for this show are going to be Saturday games, starting with the Civil War, Oregon State. We've got Oregon 3.5-point road favorites, 56.5 the total. This is a dangerous game for Oregon. Bo Nix gutted through a win against Utah last week. Give him all the credit. He was not 100%. You could definitely tell, but he did enough. He made enough plays. The defense got key stops, key turnovers of Cam Rising and the Utes offense when they needed them, and they survived, and they are on the pathway still to control their own destiny in the Pac-12. Win this game, they are in the Pac-12 championship game. Lose this game, however, and things all of a sudden get a little bit more interesting in terms of the other teams and what they do or don't do. We know USC is going to be in the Pac-12 championship game. It's a question of who's joining them. Oregon could. Utah's still alive. Washington is still alive as well. So these are all fascinating things. And Oregon State, would love nothing more than to potentially spoil Oregon's Pac-12 championship game and Rose Bowl hopes going into this game. This is a dangerous game, and this is one hell of an Oregon State defense that's playing better and better each week in Corvallis. That team at home has been pretty tough this year, Oregon State as well. It's not going to be easy for the Ducks, not at all. 4-1 straight up, 5-0 against the spread at home this year, Oregon State. This is a Beavers or pass spot for me, believe it or not. This is, and they've always given Oregon problems here the last few years. Since Jonathan Smith, who's done an incredible job here, has taken over. Oregon has not had easy games against Oregon. Oregon hasn't had easy games against Oregon State. Oregon State beat them a couple years ago. It was a one single-digit victory for Oregon last year. This is a game I don't know if I'll bet it, but I'd say buyer beware if you're going to lay more than a field goal on the road with Oregon here. This is going to be a game I think Oregon State gives them everything. And they've got a defense that if Bo Nix is less than 100%, maybe they can keep that explosive Duck offense in check a little bit. What do you think here, Connor? Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War. I always loved this game. That was such a big win for Oregon last week, and the defense made plays. Rising with those picks were huge. I thought they were going to drive down and tie that game, and it go to OT. Didn't happen. Bo Nix gutted through it. I don't know if he's 100%. Obviously, he's not his ankle, but man, Oregon State at home here. I'm taking the points. I'll take it money line as well. I think they are the better defense all the way around, and something about them here at home in Corvallis, especially going against Oregon, because they hate each other up there. So yeah, I'm on the Beavers here.
All right, Beaver Chomp here for Conor Mac with Oregon and Oregon State. All right, we go to the Sunflower State showdown, if you will. Kansas and Kansas State. Kansas State 12-point home favorite, 62.5 being the total in this game. I'll tell you what, I know going back to way back when Bill Snyder was coaching Kansas State, and it seemed like every single year Kansas State just destroys Kansas. It really hasn't been competitive for, 10, 20 years head-to-head. And even the last 2 years, 55-14, 35-10 wins and covers for Kansas State over Kansas, even with Kansas getting better. And I worry about Kansas running out of gas a little bit. They've already gotten their 6 wins. They're going to be bowling. There's a defense that's running on fumes. They don't have a lot of depth on the defensive side of the football. And I actually read a good quote from Lance Leipold saying that we're battling some depth issues right now on defense. Guys are getting hurt. Guys are wearing down. And you're seeing that with this Kansas defense right now. Jayhawks have given up, 43 and 55 in each of the last 2 games. And Kansas State's offense, look what they did against West Virginia and Baylor, 31 and 48. Adrian Martinez, who? Will Howard's playing well when you've got DJ Giddens and Deuce Vaughn running the ball for you. You've got a balanced team. Will Howard's done enough in the offense. I think I'd probably look over. I would probably stay away from a side. I'd be reluctant to take Kansas as a dog now. I think I'm off that path now. You just see this defense is totally shot right now, worn down. Injuries have mounted. They don't have the depth to replace the guys that are hurt on defense, and as a result, the defense has just not been the same the last couple of weeks. Kansas State could probably name whatever points they want, but Kansas is still capable, I think, of chipping in some offense here in this game, and they'll certainly battle their ass off as much as they can in a rivalry game. So I'd probably just stick to the total and look over here. What do you think, Connor?
The rivalry brings a little bit into it, but I mean, if you're just going off everything, I think K-State, like you talked about, they've owned them in years past. I know it's almost 2 touchdowns, but I'd have to lay it here. That Kansas defense just not look good, and we just saw K-State rip not another defense that wasn't very good in West Virginia, just torched them. I mean, they had like 40 points at halftime or some shit. I don't even know what the score was. They gave up of some, but it would be K-State or nothing here. I don't know if I play this one. And you're right, maybe there is points. That K-State defense is good. But last game they've had games where they've given up points and kind of shut teams down in other ones. So interesting here, yeah, with the total.
And keep in mind, Jalen Daniels is back from injury at quarterback for Kansas, and he was up and down last week, kind of a tough game, but first game under his belt, second game back from injury. I expect him to be a little bit better here. So I think the game can go over the number. Purdue and Indiana, and by the way, Kansas State with the situation, by the way, last week with TCU. Kansas State, TCU. Kansas State actually could be in the Big 12 championship game still. They're on pace to be in the Big 12 championship game next week. So this is still lots to play for here. If you're a Kansas State, they've got Texas behind them at 5-3 right now, and of course, K-State earlier this year lost to Texas. So it's one of those situations where Kansas State loses, Texas wins. Texas is suddenly in the Big 12 championship game. So this is important here for Kansas State, they control their own destiny, take care of business. So big stakes here for Kansas State, who could be playing TCU in the Big 12 championship game if they can get a win here. All right, Purdue and Indiana, the old Oaken Bucket here, as they call this, one of my favorite names of all the rivalry matchups. Purdue, 10, 11-point road favorites, 55.5 the total in this one. So I was starting to wonder, was Indiana checking out? And I took a small shot with Indiana last week against Michigan State, although I like the over, as I mentioned on the Saturday show, a lot more. I did not expect that. I mean, 39-31 win in overtime. Clearly, this team has still not let go of the rope for Tom Allen, which is good to see. And I got it. And look, they didn't really do much in terms of the passing game. Dexter Williams was 2 out of 7. It was all the run game, and it was all just Michigan State kind of shooting themselves in the foot throughout that football game. I mean, Michigan State still got over 500 yards of offense, but ran into issues. Peyton Thorne turned the ball over. They had the time of possession edge, 29-11 in first downs. It was just bizarre that they just couldn't capitalize and turn that yardage into points. And Indiana was able to pull off a stunning win. But it tells you the effort, at least for Indiana, is still there. It is a rivalry game. Purdue in their last 4 victories since the 20-10 win at Minnesota. Maryland win by 2, Nebraska win by 6, Illinois win by 7, Northwestern by 8 last week. This is not a win by double digits type of team right now, Purdue. Even though I like them, even though I think their passing game with O'Connell is pretty good. And remember, they've had some injuries. They've had King Doru, their running back's been out for a while. They've got some issues winning games by margin right now. So rivalry setting like this, I would lean a little bit to Indiana. And when it comes to totals with Indiana, I ain't betting anything but over with them right now. Their defense is that bad, but we saw some offense from them last week, and they probably moved the ball a little bit against Purdue. So the dog and the over are of interest to me here. What do you think, C-Matt?
Yeah, you mentioned 7 games have gone over for Indiana this year. Purdue's the better team here. I like this old Oaken Bucket, from the well or whatever it came from. But Indiana, I just, that was a big win. That was a big second half from nowhere. They didn't have much of anything in that first. Came all the way back. They are at home here. I kind of want to take them. I just haven't trusted them. It's just not a team that, I love putting my money on right now, even though they got it done last week. So I'm going to wait on this one. But I think you're right. I think they, what Purdue defense is going to show up. They've given up points to some shitty teams. So maybe Indiana, you're right. This can get over.
Yeah, I definitely like the over more than the side, but I definitely lean Indiana here. And look, I think there's incentive too, because Purdue is playing for the Big West or Big Ten West division. They can still win it. Purdue, they're 5-3. They're tied with Iowa right now for first in the Big Ten West, and I believe Purdue controls their own destiny. Purdue wins here on Saturday. Now again, they just need to win. They don't care about winning by more than 11. But if they win here, I believe they're in the Big Ten championship game, and they will end up playing, obviously, Ohio State or Michigan when it's all said and done. So we could be seeing Purdue and Indianapolis for that Big Ten championship game, and all they have to do here is win, and they will be in that game. All right, Wake Forest and Duke. Next up here, we've got Wake Forest, 3.5-point road favorites, 66.5, 67 being the total in this game. Wow, what a sweat for me. And it was my best bet on the football pub hub on Saturday, too, with Duke, the college football pub hub, plus 7.5, plus 8 they were. And we got the late backdoor touchdown there. And the dying set on 4th and like 20 it was, too. And there's Riley Leonard into the end zone touchdown, and Duke gets inside the number in a tough, hard-fought 28-26. They deserve to get inside the number. They outgained Pitt by 43 yards. It was a close game, even game. They had they got a fumble return touchdown, Pitt, that I thought was going to doom Duke. So Duke deserved the money there, even though people will say a bad beat for Pitt, but it was an even football game. Duke, I thought, getting the money there was warranted, and they've been great in the dog roll. I keep saying it. 4 straight times as a dog they've won. 4-0 ATS, their last 4 as a dog, beating Miami, nearly beating a good North Carolina team at Pitt. I mean, they've been very good in the underdog role, catching points this season, and I'm certainly interested in them plus 3.5 here against Wake a little bit. Now, Wake got back on track after 3 straight losses by beating Syracuse last week, 45-35, but that defense is still leaky, and laying points on more than a field goal on the road with a leaky defense, something I still worry about here. Probably a game where there's points in it. I mean, certainly would lean over. Duke's trending over. We know Wake, that game went over the total. I would certainly lean Duke would lean over the total here in this one. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah. There's just no way I can lay it here with Wake. Duke, as you mentioned, it was, but it was pretty shitty. Like you mentioned, that game was, a 6-point game. And then you mentioned that TD by Pitt, the defensive touchdown. So on the 4th down, 4th and 18 to get that TD. Was solid.
I was pretty happy when I saw that. I reacted more than I normally do. Yeah.
I don't blame you, dude. Hey, I was on it too, so I was pretty fucking happy too. They have Riley Leonard. I think you're right. Maybe this finally is the over, because Duke's defense, I think it's pretty good. It'd be good if they can get, Hartman, who's better last week or two, but he was in trouble there, throwing some picks. So they can get that at home here. I'll be on Duke, plus the points. I got to take them. I'll take some money line as well.
All right, South Carolina and Clemson. Next up here, we've got Clemson, 14.5-point home favorites, 50-50.5 the total. What do you make of South Carolina? Was that South Carolina good? South Carolina just played the game of their season, or was Tennessee that bad? It's probably a little bit of both last week, but that is stunning to me that Tennessee's defense did what they did last week against South Carolina. We're talking 63 points for South Carolina. And Spencer Rattler, who has been the epitome of mediocrity all season long at quarterback for the Gamecocks, he ends up with 7 incomplete passes. He had almost as many touchdown passes as incomplete passes against that Tennessee defense last week. He had 6 touchdown passes. He had 7 incomplete passes, 30 of 37, 438 passing yards through the air. I mean, it was pretty much all through the air. That's the stunning part. I mean, they did have 155 rushing yards, but over 600 yards against Tennessee. Absolutely pathetic by the Volunteers. Now, how much, again, do you factor South Carolina, give them the credit and give Tennessee the discredit for that defensive performance and that South Carolina offensive performance? That remains to be seen. If South Carolina plays like half as good as that, it feels like they could cover this number. I don't know if I trust them to. That was one of those, like, where did that come from? Type of performances from South Carolina. I don't know if that's, wow, they've just figured it out. Remember, this is the same damn team that at Florida, they couldn't move the ball a lick, and they lost 38-6 the week before. So I probably put up the stop sign in terms of backing South Carolina here. Now, as far as Clemson goes, look, back-to-back convincing home wins and covers against Louisville and Miami. We know they've been good in this rivalry. I think the last few they've crushed South Carolina repeatedly. I mean, 4-1 straight ATS, 5-0 straight up, 56-7, 34-10, 56-35, 38-3, 30-0 last year, all in favor of Clemson. So That was last week with South Carolina. I'd be scared shitless taking South Carolina in this game in this spot. I'm probably going to pass when it's all said and done here. What do you think, Con? I might lean over, sneaky over 50, because I think Clemson's offense is getting going a little bit, and I cashed a low over with that Miami game last week. I might get there with an over here, with it only being 50. What do you think, Connor?
That was just wild. That, the first quarter, just crazy. I mean, Rattler had I don't know, 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns in the first
One of the
half.
more what
It's
the
just,
fuck performances,
yes,
games of the year in college football. Yeah.
definitely. I mean, and then you go back to, they probably are feeling good about themselves, but I just what you mentioned, they've gotten their ass whipped the last few years, and I could see Rattler going back to the old Rattler and throwing picks, and Clemson takes care of business here. But still, it's over 2 touchdowns. This seems like everyone saw last week the public's going to jump all over South Carolina and take these points. Kind of a public dog. So yeah, I'm probably not going to get involved in this one, but I'll sit with it here, throughout the week.
Yeah, it's just there's sometimes when you see a team play like that when they've been struggling much of the year and you think, oh, it's a buy sign, they're going to keep it going. And then there's times where it's just it feels too much like that was a one-off and they got Tennessee on their worst day imaginable. And it kind of feels that way with South Carolina last week. But fascinating to see how that transpires. But I have my concerns that South Carolina is not able to duplicate what they did last week. Louisville, Kentucky. Next up here, Kentucky 3.5-point home favorites, 43 being the total in this game. You got to wonder what's left in the tank here for this Kentucky team. I mean, 6-5 now. I thought a pretty admirable effort against Georgia last week, 16-6 loss. But again, the offense stalls. Another loss now. That's 3 in their last 4 they've lost. All the aspirations prior to this, they're basically only going to be playing in a minor bowl game now, and that's not what Kentucky was aiming for coming into the season. And now, after games against Georgia, Vandy, Tennessee earlier, now you play Louisville outside the conference. Rivalry game, but I think for Louisville, look, they've been roughed up by Kentucky 3 years in a row. Kentucky 56-10, 45-13, 52-21. I mean, it makes you think, how can I bet Louisville here? But situationals tell me Louisville might be the play here. I mean, they're catching points. They're a team that's, I think, at this stage of the season, a little bit more capable. They've covered 5 of their last 6. The run game has always been an issue for Louisville's defense against Kentucky, but they're better run defense this year. And I think that could matter a little bit in this game. That run game might be able to get going. And look, Kentucky's run defense has gotten worse, not better. And that's Louisville's strength, is running the ball. So I know it's been dominance by Kentucky in this rivalry series the last 3 years, but I don't know if they're in the headspace now to be laying 3.5 with them. I might go against the grain here of the recent series history and take Louisville. Certainly, if I'm betting this game, that's the side I would lean with, is the Louisville side. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I don't know if I can jump on Louisville. Just every time it's been a battle, me and this Louisville football team with Cunningham at quarterback. Like you talked about, they just haven't been good against Kentucky. They haven't been good against the SEC. Louisville has. To me, I'd still be on the under. I like how Louisville's defense has been playing, and Kentucky just seems to be sleepwalking. Their offense just trouble. So yeah, even with this low total, Kentucky's had a bunch of games with these low totals and they stayed under. So I'd go right back to it here.
All right. Definitely looking toward the under there, Conor Mac with Louisville, Kentucky. All right. Michigan State and Penn State. Penn State 18-point home favorites, 52.5, 53 being the total in this game. I definitely have to give Penn State credit because, look, they were knocked out of the Big Ten division race and the Big Ten championship race earlier in the season. But, they've still kept their, the effort's been high, the focus has been high, the execution's been good, and they've destroyed 3 teams in a row, Indiana, Maryland, and Rutgers, 45-14, 30-0, 55-10. So this team definitely has not they've played well, played hard. They're still trying to get into a relatively solid bowl game when it's all said and done. Michigan State, hard to believe, hard to fathom loss. They were plus 252 in total yardage, but lose in overtime to Indiana last week. They barely got past Rutgers at home. This team that I'm not really ready to rush to bet Michigan State here in this game. And they beat Penn State last year 30-27 that would worry me a little bit here, that maybe Penn State remembers that game, maybe wanting to avenge it a little bit. And right now they're blowing teams out. So I guess if I had to, I'd lean Penn State, but I don't know if I'm going to lay 18. What do you think, Connor?
Man, Michigan State better have a game plan. That same defense comes to play. Indiana's hanging up those points. Penn State, she's 45, easy, maybe 50. So I kind of lean over. You mentioned the game last year, though, which was bad. Michigan State not having a good year beats them. So rivalry week, you'll see that. So this is one maybe. I love this was over 21, but still, I think sidewise, I'd lean to Michigan State. It's tough though with their defense, but I think maybe they could move it a little bit and hang around.
All right, the battle for, I think, Paul Bunyan's axe is what they call this, Minnesota and Wisconsin in the Big Ten. We've got Wisconsin 3-point home favorites, 34.5 the total. I'm done. I'm done with these freaking overs with Minnesota in these low 30s. That's not happening. I'm not falling for that again this week. I tried it one time, and that was it. And look, again, under Palooza, 4 straight unders for Minnesota. Wisconsin's gone under in 3 straight. This one's probably going to just fall short of that number. As far as the side goes, I mean, Wisconsin's won 3 of 4 of late. And just overall, they've had a nice little vibe going with Jim Leonard, the interim coach. He's probably going to end up being the permanent coach moving forward. Minnesota beat Wisconsin 23-13 last year. Wisconsin won the year before in overtime. I like what I'm seeing from Wisconsin. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily, though, anxious to lay 3.5, though, in what's been a competitive down-to-the-wire series in Minnesota. Like I said, the last 2 years, Minnesota's won and lost by 3. So it kind of tells you that it might be tough to lay points here with Wisconsin. Should be a defensive battle. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I don't think you want to go crazy and overthink it. This just seems low scoring, but 3.5 is valuable, so I take it. Wisconsin, though, they played a little bit better than, last week. They weren't good against Nebraska. Their offense isn't very good. So, yeah, low-scoring, tight one. If I had to, give me Minnesota. And they were ugly to watch. I mean, Abram obviously can run it, but, man, they're bringing back football back to the day.
Yeah, there's no question. Yeah, there's no question about that. Definitely, we don't expect a shootout here with Minnesota and Wisconsin. All right, the game that everyone's excited about, Michigan, Ohio State. Ohio State 7.5-point home favorites, 57 the total in this game. I mean, when I look at this, these teams are both flawed. I think people are making too much of a big deal about Michigan barely surviving Illinois. First of all, Michigan was losing bodies left and right. Blake Corum got hurt. Many of their skill position weapons on offense were banged up and or left the game against Illinois. And yet J.J. McCarthy and crew, they gutted it out. They found a way against an Illinois team that's solid. Illinois is a solid football team this year. Shouldn't act like they just barely beat, Florida International or something. No, I mean, Illinois is a solid football team. I don't think you can punish Michigan too much for that. First of all, this is probably not a game I'm betting from a side perspective. Obviously, Michigan snapped the ugly losing streak, the drought against Ohio State last year, 42-27 with that win. Ohio State wants redemption this year. A lot of those players that played last year, Stroud at quarterback, Henderson at running back, a lot of the same faces are back this year. They want redemption. And they're obviously a tough team at home, but I don't know if I'm rushing to lay 7.5 here with Ohio State. They've been a little bit flawed too. The Northwestern game wasn't pretty. Penn State on the road was a close game, much of it. Maryland was a close game, much of it last week on the road. In fact, if Maryland puts a drive together at the end of that game, they might have pulled the upset, but of course, they didn't have much time. They were backed up, and Ohio State got the defensive touchdown to put that game away. So this is more of a game where I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it, watch it. I think when it comes to the total here with these two teams, I think I could make a case for the over, and it's been a dominant over series history. 8 straight head-to-heads. Ohio State and Michigan have gone over. We've seen 69, 83, 101 just in the last 3 years alone in terms of total points. For some reason, these two teams collide, points, and more points. So I think that's the bet I'm closest to making on this game is over the total. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it gets over too again here. Ohio State, I think can score. I'm not impressed with that defense. I talked about it all year. and when they're going to play someone a little bit better. And even last week with Maryland scoring those points. So Michigan's going to score on them. I know they finally broke it last year, and they got the win. Illinois, I split it up. I did the Ian Cameron split with Illinois. They took care of business first half. Michigan should be pumped here. Hopefully they're not flat early like they've been. But yeah, I'm with Big Show and his Go Blue here. I'd be on the points over a touchdown. I think it's just too many with a defense like Ohio State's. Unless they just come out and dominate and turnovers on McCarthy, which is still a question mark with him. I think they're in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's just a little too much delay with Ohio State. Like I say, don't know if I'm going to be on Michigan, but it feels like it's a little bit too rich for me on the Buckeyes laying 7. And plus, we have to know if Corum's playing. He's day-to-day, obviously, with that ankle injury. I think he'll do everything he can to play. If he's even 80% healthy and able to move on the knee injury of his that he's got, I think you're going to end up seeing him in there. He'll find a way to play in a game of this magnitude. Obviously, Big Ten championship, Rose Bowl, and playoff, obviously, all still on the line here for these two teams. Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt, Fox Television, noon Eastern on Saturday. It should be a fun one. I mean, how good is it for Gus and Joel? They got the USC game last week. That was epic, and this one could be as well. All right, next up, we've got Notre Dame and USC in Southern Cal. In this one, we've got right now USC 5.5 point home favorites, 63 the total in this game. I'd be interested in Notre Dame here. I mean, for USC, what's there on the line? You just had the huge win against UCLA last week. I mean, Caleb Williams is playing outstanding. That offense is incredible. Addison at receiver, Ford, the other receiver's terrific. Even without Travis Dye, the running back that's taken his spot's been very good for USC. That offense is not going to be easy for this Notre Dame defense to stop. But from a situational standpoint, they're in the Pac-12 championship game already. This is a non-conference game. They know the big game in this next week. Obviously, they don't want to slip up because they still have an outside playoff shot, USC. But I still worry about this spot laying points with a weak defense. They still struggle on defense, USC. They're having issues there. Off the big win against a Notre Dame team that we know is better in the underdog role. And they've been that way all year. And look, I was dead wrong with Boston College, totally non-competitive. And I was worried. Notre Dame finally going to put their A game together, and they did. Even in the snow, it became a blizzard in the second half in that game in South Bend, and they just ran away with it against Boston College. And, with USC already in the Pac-12 championship game, off a huge rivalry win against UCLA, what do they have in the tank this week with a weak defense? I can't lay 5.5 in this spot with USC. So it'd be Notre Dame or pass for me. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, the Irish just have been good on the road, good at dogs. Last little bit. That was a big win for them.
Yep.
Yeah. They just seem to be coming together. That defense has looked really good last few weeks. You go back to the Syracuse game, since then. Pine has looked even a little bit better. And in the end, they have the better defense. And they're catching points. This is the problem. You have a bad defense laying numbers. Ain't gonna work out. I'll take those points all day long. I think Notre Dame keeps this game close. Yeah, but on the other side though, SC obviously, Caleb Williams, this guy lights it up. His video game. The guy's unbelievable. But Irish, I think can get it done there. I'll take some money line. It won't be easy, but I think this game will be close. So give me the points.
I'd certainly lean that way. I'd probably end up on Notre Dame. I just think it's, and we've it's easier said than done for USC trying to bounce back from, or trying to, not bounce back. They won the game, but, recover from just such an emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting game. Because that was a battle right down to the wire with UCLA last week. Be interesting to see what they've got left in the tank here for Notre Dame here at home in this game. On Saturday. All right, Washington State, the Apple Cup. This is the name of this one, annual rivalry game here. Washington 2-point road favorites, 59 being the total in this game. I probably lean Wazoo a little bit here. I mean, I'm not someone that's going to be looking to take Washington on the road. They're only 1-3 against the spread on the road, 2-2 straight up. The 2 road wins, albeit impressive, were Oregon and Cal was a solid road win, but they also have the losses on the road to Arizona State and UCLA. So Jekyll and Hyde a little bit for Washington on the road going into this game. Of course, Washington is clearly not going to be in the mix as far as the actually. I'm trying to think, is there an outside shot they could make it? Well, because they beat Oregon, yes. Because of the fact they had that upset win, they go to 7-2, and if Oregon were to lose to Oregon State, they both be 7-2. Washington gets the tiebreaker. There is a pathway for Washington here to still potentially make it to the Pac-12 championship game, but a lot is going to have to go right for them, and they're also going to have to look towards potentially some kind of help from Colorado against Utah, which probably isn't happening. But there's a lot of logistics that go into it, but there is a slim path for Washington to still be in the Pac-12 championship game. So there is still something to shoot for, but I still don't think I want to lay 2 on the road here with Washington. Washington State 4-2 straight up, 5-1 against the spread at home. Cameron Allen played a very good game last week in their victory against Arizona. Probably one of those games where we see points. I trust both offenses more than both defenses. This is Pullman, Washington, late November. Check the weather. You always worry, rain, snow, wind. Will we get something like that? We've seen these kind of bad weather games before in the Apple Cup with these two teams. But if the weather's decent, could see this game go over the total. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I think if it's decent weather, I think we go over here. Washington State, too, I think has the better defense if they can make plays. A little bit, though, Washington has a better quarterback with Penix. Ward's been okay. He's been good. He's been bad. He's thrown some bad picks. He's been up and down. But I do think Washington State has a better defense. I think this is a good game, and I do think there's points. As long as, there's not some crazy rain, crazy thing going on, I think this gets over the total.
All right, Iowa State, TCU, Big 12, I should say here. We've got TCU in this one, somehow staying undefeated, now laying 10.5 against Iowa State, 47.5 the total in this game. For the first time, I shouldn't say for the first time because I've tried to fade TCU, and then I said, well, I'm not going to fade TCU anymore. And I was lucky with TCU money line, let's be honest. I mean, they needed a drive at the end. They had the fire drill to get the kicking unit on the field in time, and they kicked the game-winning field goal. But now you're laying 10.5 off another massive win as they avoid their first loss of the year. And I'll say this about Iowa State. Their offense is not very good, but a lot of games they have been competitive. I mean, their biggest margin of defeat here in Big 12 play was a 14-point loss at home to Oklahoma in a game they actually outgained Oklahoma. Other than that, they lost by 6 at Oklahoma State, 4 against Texas Tech, by 3 at Texas, by 1 against Kansas State, by 3 at Kansas, by 7 against Baylor. I mean, they've been in every game, essentially. They're not an easy team to lay 10.5 against Iowa State for as bad as their offense is. So, again, you're right. TCU injuries as well. Keep an eye on that. TCU, you got Kendre Miller as well. He had a big workload, and he is day-to-day right now with that injury. I think that's who you're talking about. It's Kendre Miller and as well Darius Davis, who missed the last game, and also Johnston as well. Quentin Johnston left the game with a right ankle. Darius Davis banged up. Kendre Miller, their all-world running back, banged up. So keep an eye on these injuries on offense for TCU going into this game. But first early in the week look for me is, I think, wouldn't shock me if Iowa State hangs around a little bit in this game. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, hey, as big as the win is, they could get right back here and be flat as all hell. One thing Iowa State does is play defense, and you mentioned they've been in these games. I didn't love them last week. Texas Tech beat them, which was good. The game stayed under. TCU dealing with those injuries. I'd just be, I wouldn't just go race and be like, TCU, lay it. And this is going to be some comfortable win. And you get everyone's best effort. Undefeated team. They want to, believe me, they want to beat them. The only thing is, maybe a TCU defense, at times can be leaky because Iowa State their offense isn't any good. That's the trouble here. This team just can't score. So, interesting one. I don't know if I get involved. I might grab the points, but probably one I'm just going to stay off.
All right, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. Next up, Oklahoma 2-point road favorite, 64 being the total in this game. Oklahoma, I'll tell you, I got to say, whoever it was in the chat warned us as an Oklahoma State fan about the Cowboys last week. I give him all the credit in the world. I'll shout him out. I forget who his name was, but he said, I'm worried about Oklahoma State in this spot. And sure enough, Oklahoma beat them and won and covered 28-13 last week. They get bowl eligible with that victory. Oklahoma 6-5. Still been a disappointing season by their standards. Texas Tech back-to-back wins against Kansas and Iowa State. Oklahoma won 52-21 last year, 4 straight overs head-to-head. Oklahoma, Texas Tech. I mean, that's probably the way I would go when this game is over. If I were to bet anything, it's been a very high-scoring series history. I know last week it was a low-scoring game for Tech, but that was Iowa State. They drag everyone into the mud in a defensive battle, a lower-scoring game. They play very slow on offense. I think we'll get back to some points. I don't know if I love either side in this game, but definitely looking at the over here in this one. And I think Tyler Shuck at quarterback here should be able to have some success against this still leaky Oklahoma defense. One okay performance against a, troubling. I don't think he was less than 100% either, Spencer Sanders. I don't think he was 100% in that game for Oklahoma State. I think it's going to be tougher for Oklahoma. I still don't buy Oklahoma's defense. They've turned things around with that performance last week. They're going to have to show it again. It's been an over series history. Overs the way I would probably look in this game. What do you think, C-Mac?
That's where I was looking in this one. I think we get back to a shootout and points. The biggest deal is just Sanders. He was not. There's no way. He's, I don't know, 50%. So if you thought that going in, you can't throw 3 picks right away. They didn't score again, by the way. And the whole problem was Oklahoma State moved it and couldn't get in the end zone. Yeah. So I mean, that was their problem.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So I still don't trust Oklahoma. Not with that defense. Texas Tech's been good. I don't know if I get involved either. I do like the over, but I don't know if I jump on Tech too.
All right, LSU, Texas A&M. LSU 9.5-point road favorites, 47 the total in this game. I mean, A&M last week at home against UMass, and I know they outgained them by 236, but again, too many times they didn't turn enough of those yards into points. Connor Weigman, they think, is going to be the future at quarterback, and I think he could be. He's showing some glimpses, but I'm telling you what, I'm still not comfortable taking A&M, and I'll give LSU credit here a little bit for one thing, is the fact that they really don't have a whole lot going in terms of it being at stake here in these last few games of the season. And after the Arkansas win, would they go through the motions against UAB? They did not. 41-10. It was an impressive performance, both sides of the football. Jaden Daniels, again, continuing to play pretty well on offense. They ran the football as well. The defense played a good game against UAB. They did not show signs of just, hey, we're going to go through the motions because we're already in the SEC championship game against Georgia. No, they did not. So I think I'd lean LSU, honestly, here in this game. Now, they are on the road, and remember, we did see at Arkansas. They were life and death in that game, but I don't trust A&M enough. I mean, 20-3 at home to UMass is very impressive, in my opinion. What do you think here, Connor?
This is a dead pass, just pass for me. Yep. And I took LSU a little bit on them. We thought they'd roll, and they did. They played well. Texas A&M just can't score. I mean, that in the UMass game, ugly. Like, man, I like a good dog here, almost catching 10. But, man, it's tough right now to take A&M. I think this is a game you shouldn't bet, in my opinion.
Nothing wrong with that. I think it is
should
tough.
Win.
It's tough.
But I think it's tough. I mean, could they win by 14 or something? Yeah, but this could be tight.
Do they care enough to win by more than double digits with the SEC championship against Georgia coming up next week? Which that's going to be the question, too. Now, they can't afford a slip-up either. Because obviously they can't lose this game or else the playoff chances would be shot right there, regardless, I think, of what happens in the SEC championship game. But it doesn't mean that they need to win by margin either. All right, West Virginia and Oklahoma State. We've got Oklahoma State 8.5-point home favorite, 65.5 being the total in this game. Oklahoma State 7-4, kind of limping down the stretch. They are undefeated at home, 4-2 against the spread at home, but 3 of their last 4 games they've lost, and the only win was a 6-point win against Iowa State where they had to come from behind. On the other hand, you got West Virginia, and other than squeaking out a win against Oklahoma, I mean, they've been roughed up, double-digit losses for the last 5 weeks. 4 straight unders all of a sudden. What's happened to Oklahoma State's offense? And Spencer Sanders hasn't been, I don't think he was 100% healthy, like I said last week, but obviously he struggled since he's been banged up down the stretch. I mean, I could make a case for the over. I could make a case for the dog because I'm not excited about laying more than a touchdown with Oklahoma State, but I can't say I'm in love with either side or total. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, you talk about the game. Really, I don't want to get involved with West Virginia. That defense is just horrible. Oklahoma State, the injury with Sanders, they can't score now all of a sudden. Now they're laying this number. Phew, off.
That's not a bad option, maybe, to just say El Paso on that one. And the final game for this edition of Hitting the Books, the Iron Bowl. What a great way to end it. Auburn and Alabama. Alabama 21.5-point home favorites, 49 the total in this game. I mean, I'm telling you what, Alabama's obviously, 9-2, not obviously in the playoff race anymore. You're looking for signs of that they're still mentally there and dialed in, and Austin Peay, you can't get much from that. You could get something from the Ole Miss game, and after the loss to LSU, they were lethargic in that game, very fortunate to win it. I'd be reluctant to lay this many with Alabama. I mean, Auburn under Cadillac Williams, Carnell Williams, of course, they had Bucks running back many years ago for a little bit in the NFL. It's definitely showing some signs of life. 3 straight point spread covers for Auburn since he took over. They lost in OT to Mississippi State. They beat A&M. They crushed Western Kentucky. Now, none of those teams on the level of Alabama, but is Alabama's execution and focus and intensity and all this stuff there at the level they need? And is Bryce Young in a situation where I don't know if he's fully been 100% healthy either down the stretch? I'd consider Auburn. And the one thing here with Auburn is last year, it's not like that was a good Auburn team. Took Alabama to overtime. Almost 3 touchdown underdogs, 24-22 in that game. So, yeah, to me, this is an Auburn side if I'm betting it here in the Iron Bowl. What do you think here, Connor?
You know what these have been? It's, Bama's blown them out a few times, but these are tough games, too many points here. And, how much does Bama really give a shit in this one? I think Auburn's hangs around. I like how Auburn's been playing. They've been winning, like you mentioned, the last few weeks. A lot of people liked Western Kentucky. They beat them down. That game got over, thank God. But yeah, I think 3 touchdowns in this rivalry, just too many. Too many athletes too with Auburn. I know they haven't been good this year, but I'd be on the points. I think it's just too many here, over 3 touchdowns.
Don't look now, but also, too, with Alabama, the run defense has come unglued a little bit for them. LSU ran the football down their throat.
All year.
Ole Miss had a good day running the football with Judkins, 135 rushing yards. And Auburn is a run-first offense with Bigsby. Yeah. So that's why I think they can hang in this game. They can get Tank Bigsby. They can get the run game going. Let me compare it for you, Connor. I'll throw out the numbers here. It's worth mentioning this. Alabama's full season run defense, their numbers, 107.8 rushing yards per game allowed, 3.1 yards per carry allowed. In the last 3 games, it goes up to 145 rushing yards per game allowed. And the yards per carry go from 3.1 for the season to 4 yards per carry allowed the last 3 games. Not the same Alabama run defense. And maybe Bigsby gets going and possess the ball, keep Young in the offense of Alabama off the field, and cover a big number of more than 3 touchdowns like this.
Yeah, and in a game like this, too, in this huge, big of a rivalry, you throw everything. The kitchen sink, a trick play, everything's involved here. An onside kick, some shit that you normally might not do, you do it here.
Yeah, you definitely do. And look, bowl eligibility, too, for Auburn. Not obviously a good season for them, but if there's any we give a shit attitude from the players about getting to a bowl game, then obviously you show up here because they're 5-6, and a win here for Auburn would get them to a bowl game. So fascinating Iron Bowl, even with Alabama kind of having a slightly disappointing season by their standards. But that tells you how ridiculous the expectations are. We're calling a 9-2 season disappointing right now for Alabama. All right, great stuff. That is the Hitting the Books show for this week. Great card shaping up here in college football. Definitely looking forward to it. hit the like button. We've got a bunch of viewers in the chat. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Become a member, $4.99 a month on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. A lot of perks, incentives with that, so make sure you sign up for that. Connor and I will wrap up the show. Final words from us, closing remarks, and we'll say goodbye right after we hear from Manscaped and Southtown 101. I'm digging the new music with those ads. Holy shit. Great stuff. Man. Yeah, that's the good stuff. So I got that classic rock sound to it. Awesome.
You're ripping the air guitar?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm digging it. Digging it. Southtown 101, San Antonio. Stop in. Great food, drinks, live music, DJs, karaoke, and manscaped.com. 20% off your purchase using promo code PubSports. Hell of a show. And we've got just the tip of the iceberg here. I'm on for NBA Pub Hub at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm back with our Conor Mac, the two of us, for Net Profit College Basketball at 5 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, I'm on the NFL live stream tonight with Jimmy the Bag and company for 49ers and Cardinals, Stadio Azteca in Mexico City. So busy Monday for me still to come. So join us for all that. Connor, final thoughts?
No, shout out to the chat, everyone in here. RVD 420 in my locker room, Nunya, Alex Hills, Leo said it. Here's a K-State, best team in purple. I think, there's a team in TCU that might argue with that, Mills. And, I can't answer that question. You got to watch Net Profit later, my man.
Now, we're not answering college basketball questions here. We got a whole show coming up at 5 p.m. Eastern for college basketball, Net Profit. So looking forward to that. Good stuff indeed. Lots of tournament action day and night. So good week for college basketball. Join us for that. Join me at 4 p.m. for NBA Pub Hub, the NFL live stream tonight, and everything else at Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you're checking it out. And we're back, of course, next Monday, hitting the books, conference championship week next week in college football. Looking forward to breaking those games down once again right here on Hitting the Books next Monday. For Conor Mac, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll see you next Monday, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, for another edition of Hitting the Books right here on Pub Sports Radio.
Welcome to another edition of The Walking Dead.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of EPL on
Class is in session, hitting the books on Pub Sports.
This is another